Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Kellen here with Droid Life. So I've got in front of me still the HTC 10. We're inching closer and closer to that full review. But before we do that, we just want to talk about all the cool tips and tricks we've discovered along the way and hopefully help you then once you are able to buy this phone whenever that time comes. So here we go. Here are tips and tricks for the HTC 10. All right, so I think the best place to start is probably at the blank black lock screen. So HTC builds in motion launch gestures to most of their phones. And what those allow you to do is do some swipes or taps or things like that and jump into items you probably want to access often, like the camera, your home screen, things like that. So the few I have enabled are swipe up, and that actually unlocks me to wherever I was last on my phone. So even if I was in Chrome last, a swipe up takes me right back there. So not necessarily just an unlock to your home screen, but wherever you last left off. Now they've also built in a swipe right and swipe left, and those will get into either Blinkfeed or actually back to your home screen. I have those turned off because I don't use them that often. But another one you're going to definitely want to remember is the double swipe down. That actually launches the camera. So quick shortcut there. That is the quickest way so far from HTC to get into the camera. So obviously if you want to take pictures on the fly, that's a good one to know. HTC also does a double tap to wake, which I swear works 1 out of 2 times. And there you go, it wakes it. And then another double tap makes it go back to sleep. They didn't stop there though. You can also take advantage of the fingerprint reader, which is down here. And all you have to do is just sort of put your finger over that and tap on it, and it wakes the phone up. And then if you want to go back to sleep, you can do that. But just a little tap over the fingerprint and it'll wake the phone. So kind of neat. Speaking of fingerprint, let's unlock that. This is just one of those things you should set up. And I talk about this in most of my videos, but if you go into settings, fingerprint scanner there, you will see that you can set up a number of fingers. Again, I have 4 set up, and my 4 are each thumb. So when I'm holding the phone in either hand, I can quickly unlock like that. And then I also do each index finger. So when the phone is on a desk, I can just put finger out, and go ahead and unlock that way. So that's just where you're going to want to access those and definitely set those up. And then here is the box for wake up screen. So that thing where I showed you to tap on the fingerprint reader to get into there, this is where you'll find that option. So continuing on with sort of that security idea, if we jump into security, smart lock. Now we talk about this a lot in most of our videos. And so smart lock is one of those things where you can teach your phone, and here's a little description about it. Essentially, you can teach your phone to do things where it'll allow you to bypass your secure lock screen, depending on what you're doing, what you're attached to, where you are. And so I always set a couple of these up. For one, I set up my Bluetooth headphones for when I'm working out so that it's never locked really while I'm working out. I can quickly access it. Have it set up to my car multimedia as well. And then I always set up a trusted place. So when I'm at home, it's unlocked because it's a secure environment and I can leave my phone unlocked. So I set that up. But you can do on-body detection and trusted voice and all those things as well. You could set up your work if you want it to be unlocked when you're at work. And then once you leave those locations or you detach from those devices, the phone's lock screen then comes back on, either needs a fingerprint or a pattern or pin or what have you. But when you're attached to those or in those areas, you don't have to swipe a pattern or use a fingerprint every single time you want to unlock something. Smart lock's one of those things Google did years ago, and it's just one of my favorite things of all time. So now I would take you into the home screen area, and you should definitely go ahead and try to set this up as much as you can. So in order to do that, you can swipe around, and you can see over here to the left by default is Blinkfeed. If you just pinch, you will get to an area where you can add widgets or add extra home panels. You can drag and drop these, I promise, and rearrange things and stuff like that. You can drag and set specific ones as your home screen. I definitely want this as my home screen and over here. But so you can do all of this stuff, and you can grab widgets from down here and drag them up and set them in different screens and things like that. And so it really takes some time to customize that. The more efficiently you set this up, the better experience you sort of get with your home screen. One thing I did want to point out though in particular on here is how to create a folder and then add a whole bunch of apps to it in a hurry. So in order to create a folder, it's the same as it's always been. You grab one app and drop it on another, and that gets a folder started. So when you tap on there, rather than going through, say, your app drawer and dragging and dropping one app individually, if you hit this little plus button right here, tap on that, it gives you the opportunity to just check a whole bunch of boxes. And then when you're done, those will then all be added to your folder. And then you can rearrange it from there and rename it and things like that. But that is really the quickest way to just create a folder and throw a whole bunch of apps inside of it. All right, so if you're using this HTC 10 and you happen to have the stock clock that comes preloaded up at the top, and it's a nice clock, so I've continued to use it. But one thing I will say is make sure you set up your home. So you can see this little house box right there. So if you tap up here on the menu and go into set home time zone, this is where you get to choose where your home time zone is. So I just set it as Portland because that's my home city. But then you'll notice there's this other Portland up here. So it looks like I have two set, but this is based on my location. So if I were to then travel, say to New York or something like that, when I open up my phone, it will then display both Portland's time and the location-based time. So it'll say like San Francisco or New York time and weather, and then Portland time and weather. And it does that from your lock screen as well. So that's why I would say make sure you set that up if you're using their clock, because then it kind of adjusts on the fly and always shows you what the time is back home and things like that. So I mentioned Blinkfeed earlier. So Blinkfeed is a swipe over here to the left. So I would say with Blinkfeed, you have two options. Set it up if you like using any of this stuff and integrating your Twitter and Instagram, I think, and some news feeds, and I have my Fitbit in there as well, or turn the thing off. So if you want to turn it off, you pinch back out, you can grab Blinkfeed, drag it up to remove, and that kills Blinkfeed. So now if I go home, I can no longer swipe that way to get to Blinkfeed, and this is probably how I'm going to use it going forward, or I can still swipe over here and get to this. If you want to use Blinkfeed, you can, we'll just go back here, back up. If you pull out this menu, you can go into this plus box, and this is where you choose what you want to be on there. So you can see my Fitbits in there, but your Twitter and your news and your calendar, and this is where you would add all of that stuff if Blinkfeed is something you want to do. So next thing I would say, go into the app drawer. So when you first open this phone, it's sort of set up as this custom sorted. I'm not a huge fan of the way it's laid out. So I would suggest going to alphabetical. Then at least you know what the order is going on here. But if you don't want that, feel free to customize and sort of do your own thing. One thing to keep in mind too is with the menu up here, if you go into show hide apps, this is a way to just hide a whole bunch of apps. Now, if you buy a carrier variant, like say AT&T AT&T is not selling it. If you buy the Verizon, T-Mobile, or Sprint model, you could have a bunch of bloatware pre-installed. So this is a good way to then hide all of those apps from ever showing up. Again, this is an unlocked one, so I don't necessarily have a whole bunch of apps I need to hide, but that is the best way to do it. You can also do some other things in this menu like manage apps. If you tap on that, that'll get you into the manage apps screen of Android where you can uninstall, disable apps, things like that. And then you can even change the grid size in here. And this is one of those odd things that HTC's done is the 3x4 grid, which I don't know that anyone actually likes, but if you do, this is where you find it is in grid size. So then moving out of there, I would say start to really customize this thing by doing themes. And so if we long press, you can get into edit current theme. We can also go home and go into change theme, and it's telling me I need an internet connection. So we'll turn Wi-Fi on. So HTC, like LG, like Samsung, is doing theming, and they're allowing you to do some themes, and they're actually doing it a little bit different than everybody else. So they have, their theme store, which will load here in a second once I have my Wi-Fi up. But they're also letting you custom sort of make themes, or where they take wallpapers you have and then they try to customize them to make them sort of fit your style, or let you sort of choose without having to go look through a whole bunch of things. So if this ever does actually load up here, there's a recommended area where you can go through and look at and see different themes with different icons and different wallpapers, and they changed some other things. So let's just look at, say, this one because it's nice and colorful, and they should show you screenshots of what everything's going to look like, and they do. And so they give you sort of these options. But my suggestion is to hit this plus button right here. And when you do that, it then takes a look at the wallpaper you have, and you can actually choose one if you want. So I could go into choose home and camera, and here's a picture of my other desk. And so I'll just sort of move this around a little bit and say I'm done and save, and then that will change that, and then it sort of analyzes, and then I hit next, and then it should create themes based on that wallpaper. So it tries to suggest specific icon packs that maybe match that color scheme. Like this one does a pretty good job. It changes Blinkfeed to match it, and your wallpaper, and just some other colors. So it's really a cool way to get into sort of your own custom theme that's based off something that you would potentially use. So that's themes. And again, I highly suggest taking a look at it. So after customizing themes, I would say go into the display settings. So if we go into display settings, one of the things that HTC does that I really appreciate is they give you a little bit of control over what your color profile is. So we've seen this in some other phones, but what HTC is doing is giving you either a vivid or an sRGB mode. So sRGB is standard RGB color range. Vivid is a little bit more punchy, saturated, all of that stuff. Sort of like that AMOLED experience, if you will. So right now I have it in sRGB, and watch this sort of teal color change when I go to vivid. So it just sort of brightens up a little bit. One of the things you can do though is sort of tweak all of this. So you have the normal appearance, but you can make it colder, warmer, so you can kind of see. And what they're doing is giving you a white over here. And so you can decide how you want that white to look. If you want it warmer, cooler, all of that stuff, which is kind of cool. And I really do appreciate the fact that HTC is letting you sort of control a little bit more of the colors you see on the phone. The LCD panel in here, definitely not my favorite, but it's also not bad. It's better than what LG is doing. So, and the fact that you can now customize it is pretty cool here. So let's see, if we jump back through into settings, actually we'll stay... I meant to stay there. So in gestures and buttons and all this stuff as well, same area, you can actually tweak the recent apps button. So that would be this button right here. So you can have it do recent apps for sure, or you can switch it to just being a menu button, but a press and hold will do recent apps, or you can have it do recent apps, but a press and hold brings up a menu. So if you're one of those types that doesn't like reaching up to Google's design style to hit menu buttons all the time, you may want to use it as a menu or one of these other two options. I don't mind that, and the long press isn't my thing, so I leave it as always open. But it's just something to consider in case you do want a menu button. All right, so if we jump out here and go into sound and notification, I believe, and scroll into do not disturb, if I can find it. There it is, do not disturb. So it's one of those things I've been recommending people do for a little while now. Do not disturb mode in Android. It's now built in natively, and everyone's just sort of letting Google handle it at this point. But what you should do is set up a schedule. Basically, it turns your phone to silent at a certain time and then turns it back to normal again in the morning. So when you go to bed at night, it's good to have your phone being silent and not notifying you and buzzing you and blinking at you and all of that stuff, right? But then in the morning, you may want it to start doing that should you've slept through an alarm or who knows what. But so you can set up a schedule. So obviously I have one that runs every single day, turns on 11:45 at night, turns back off at 6:30 in the morning. And you can customize this stuff to do all sorts of things. So you can have it set up so that only priority contacts and things get through, so that only your alarms get through, or so that it's just complete total silence where you don't even want alarms messing with you. So you tap and add a rule here, and you can do it based off of time or just based off of an event. And so it's one of those things I recommend you just sort of go through and set up. Once you've set it up, it then just sort of is a set and forget sort of things. And here's your priority information, who you let calls come from, messages, and all of that stuff. It's just one of those features that really should have been in Android a long, long time ago, but it's now there in every single phone, and you may as well take advantage of it. All right, so this phone has an SD card slot right here. So SD card slot expands the memory, obviously, of this phone. You get 32 out of the box, but you can add in up to 2 terabytes theoretically. One cool thing though that HTC does, well, tip here for number one is put a damn SD card in here. You're going to want that extra storage because as you can see here, after only a couple of weeks of owning this phone, I'm already using over half of my storage. So put an SD card slot or an SD card in the slot. But then one thing HTC is doing that not many people are is they're allowing you to format this as internal storage. So this is an Android Marshmallow feature. And what that allows you to do is format an SD card and encrypt it and sort of treat it like it's internal storage. So installing apps, it's all sort of like a single partition sort of. And so it just allows for a more sort of seamless integration of storage with your phone and storing things and all of that. Now, there's some downsides. If you don't want, or I should say, if you want to be able to move your SD card to another phone or plug it into a computer or things like that, you probably don't want to format it as internal. Basically, when you're formatting it as internal, you want to just leave it there all the time. If you take it out, you could break things. And again, it's also encrypted, so you can only access it from this phone. If you want to use it as a normal SD card, you just put it in and leave it there. But there is the option, and it's called adoptable storage. And that's one of the things HTC's done that almost no one else is doing. So sort of a big deal, especially to Android nerds. If we jump out here and go into power, So HTC does some things where they have a power saver or an extreme power saver mode. Now, what these do is when your phone is about to die, they start shutting things down to hopefully conserve energy and make your phone last longer because they're assuming that you're nowhere near a charger. So with power saver, what I would suggest doing is going in and having it automatically turn on at a certain percentage. So at 15%, it turns on for me and starts sort of shutting things down. If you're getting into the extreme area, which I have set at 10%. I should probably have that automatically turn on. This goes into an even more low power mode where almost nothing works and your phone basically can make calls and you can check the time, and that's pretty much it. It's not something you're going to hopefully ever have to use that often, but it is there. And if you want to just manually toggle these on, there are buttons for that. Now, one other thing in here, and this is just for those of us who are battery freaks and constantly want to know our percentage, there is a checkbox down here for show battery level. And what that's talking about is your battery percentage up here in the status bar. Just check that and it'll add your percentage. Now, if you're a neat freak and you don't want that area showing the ugly percentage, uncheck that. But for me, I just, especially during testing, I like to know that's there. But this is where you'll find that setting. So the next thing I would suggest you do is change keyboards. Now, I rarely tell you to just completely ditch the stock keyboard for whatever's on there, but the HTC 10 keyboard is so bad. So it's basically TouchPal's keyboard. I don't know if you've ever used TouchPal's keyboard. Definitely not one of the top keyboards that we talk about a lot on Android, but it is there and it's sort of a bigger name. I'm just not a fan of it, and I don't know that you'll like it either. So I've installed Kruma. I don't have Google's installed, but I have Kruma and Flexi, two third-party keyboards I highly recommend. They're both really good. Or just go install the Google keyboard, which you can never go wrong with, and just get rid of TouchPal. And you can find all of these on Google Play. And in order to switch these if you want, well, you can open them once you install them and walk through a tutorial, but otherwise settings, language, and keyboard, current keyboard, and then choose the one you want. I'm sorry, TouchPal, if you're watching this, but your keyboard is just not any good here. Let's see. So screen pinning is one of those things I believe arrived in Marshmallow or Lollipop, somewhere around there, but it's one of those things to take advantage of. I use it a lot when my child is playing games or watching a movie on my phone or something like that. And basically when you hit the recent apps button and you do this sort of scroll up, you'll see a little pin here. So if you tap that, it then locks that screen to the screen so that they can't get out unless they use a special combination. So you can see here screen is pinned. HTC does a little bit differently though, and this is how I'm pointing this out to you in terms of unlocking. So it actually says hold power and back at the same time to unpin. I don't know that anyone else does it that way, so I want to show you that it's a bit finicky. So power and back are here, and then it's unpinned. So the first couple of times I did this, I did it wrong and it tried to turn off and some other things, but basically hold those at the same time and it should unpin. So that's how you do it. For those who don't know exactly how this works, if you do pin something, you can see if I hit home, I hit back, I hit the recent apps button, it's obviously stuck on this screen. So again, to get out is back and this button, and hopefully, there we go, that does unpin it. So pinning, it really just comes in handy if you haven't ever used it. So let's jump in the camera here to finish things out. So in the camera, and we'll just bring something over to have as a subject. So I would just point out a couple of things. There's obviously the standard automatic shooting mode, which is the way it opens out of the box. But then I would also say before we ever start shooting, go into settings. And once you've put in that SD card, just make sure your storage is switched to removable storage. Again, there's only 32 gig internally. You're going to want to save all of your photos. I would just do that there. But then the next thing I would say is when you swipe this menu out, take a look at some of these other camera modes, Zoe and Pro mode in particular. So Zoe's been around on HTC phones forever. If you don't know Zoe, this is essentially sort of like Apple's live photos, or I think whatever Samsung's calling their sort of motion photos. But basically what it does is you take a photo and then it records 3 seconds of video afterwards. So Apple's, I think, does before and after. This just does after. But HTC seriously did this, I think, with the original One M7. So if we then go into our gallery, you'll see we have this 3-second video that was filmed right after I took a photo. And then if I swipe over, there is the actual photo I took. Now, I took some other ones, like here's my hand. And there is a 3-second video that I took afterwards. And look, the whole point is that you can capture maybe some funny, candid moments or something like that. But it is something that HTC has done long before anyone else considered doing this. Then finally, the last thing I would say is go into Pro mode. and just sort of mess with this stuff. If you're a photographer, maybe even if you're not a photographer, this might be a good way to learn. You can go in here and change things like white balance, which really is just going to change the sort of color of your photo. And if you tap the A up there, by the way, that will get you into an auto mode. You can change exposure and things like that as well, depending on your lighting situation. So these are all just things you can sort of tweak. You can even tweak the, I believe this is the focus. No, this is the shutter speed. So you can tweak the shutter speed, and then here is where you can actually tweak the focus from macro and things like that. So you can really start playing with this and probably take some pretty cool photos. And again, it's just sort of a way to learn how a camera functions, at least what some of the functionality is. So anyway, that's been 20 or so tips and tricks for the HTC 10. Hopefully that helps you guys get the most out of your phone. If you guys have comments, questions, let us know. We're Droid Life. Peace.